I'm ready.
Well, Joel Salatin, good morning, sir. It is great to finally have you here with us on Ranching Reboot. How are you in Virginia?
I'm doing great, and it's a privilege and an honor to be with you. Yes.
Well, that's a little bit flattering. So I imagine out there in podcast land, there's maybe one or two of my listeners that don't actually know who you are. So can you give us your 30-second introduction elevator speech?
Sure. So I'm a Christian libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. Our family co-owns Polyface Farm in western Virginia, not to be confused with West Virginia. And in the Shenandoah Valley, we have beef, pork, chicken, turkey, rabbit, lamb, duck eggs, and lumber, forestry products, and we direct market everything to individuals as a brand.
Very cool. Very cool. Haven't you written also like 12 or 13 books?
Yeah, 15 books, and in fact, I just finished number 16 Saturday, and I mean just the rough draft of it, but it's sitting here ready for the next review. Yes.
Oh, can we get an early preview of the title?
Yes, the title is Homestead Tsunami: Good for Our Country, Kids, and Critters.
Okay, I get it. Wow, I think that's a great place to jump off. And so in the last couple of years since all right, Spotify, give me another COVID warning. Since COVID hit the world and really started changing the way people look at how their job and what's essential and social contact, and especially food and food culture, it does kind of seem like we're getting, as as you put it in your book title, a tsunami of new homesteaders. Um, New money, tech money, trying to flee the cities, flee the East Coast, flee the West Coast, and go somewhere where land is cheaper, where they can work remotely and do a little homesteading. Um, I'm assuming you see some problems with that.
Well, I see a great deal of encouragement from that. I'm thrilled to see people become homesteaders, and so this book is about the why. What is driving this? Everything from urban crime to, yeah, you mentioned it. Food, food safety, food security issues. Kids and screen time, uh, all sorts of issues, and so I think intuitively, Brian, when people feel like the wheels are going to come off, if the wheels are going to come off, I don't want to be stuck in the city. They want to be out where they can, drink from a creek, shoot a deer, and survive. And so there is absolutely a homestead tsunami going on right now in the country, and of course it's driving a lot of things. I mean, a nuance of it was the fact that in 2020, 1 million new backyard flocks of chickens started. 1 million new backyard flocks of chickens in 2020. In 2020, Lehman's, who's they're the non-electric supplier there in Ohio. They sold 10 years worth of canning lids in 6 months. Or I'm sorry, in a year. In 2020, they sold what they sold in canning lids, what they normally sell in 10 years. And so these all speak of a renewed interest in in these kinds of self-reliant independence issues. The phrase I hear people come in here all the time and they say, how do I disentangle? How do I disentangle? They feel, with digital currency coming along, the tracking we see around, how do I disentangle from the system so I can opt out? And I think the homestead movement is part of that, part of that whole awareness, just like you said.
Yeah, people are wanting to be more in charge of their food, and you brought up a million new backyard chicken flocks in 2020, and something that's been in the news by the time this comes out, it'll been a couple of weeks ago, is egg shortage and egg prices.
Yes.
That was something we talked about I've talked about previously in podcast episodes about, what do we do if one of these big commercial hatcheries go down? And where I'm going with this is, yeah, we've got a million new people that want to do backyard chickens. And I'm assuming that most of those bought their fertilized eggs or bought chicks, from farm store or from one of our big commercial hatcheries. And it seems like the egg shortage that's going on right now in grocery stores is because there's not layer flocks because they had to be culled several months ago for bird flu. So where I'm going is, are you developing your own chicken breed? Do you raise your own chickens, or are you still buying eggs?
So for our layers, we have been hatching our own chicks now. We have our own breeder flock. We hatch our own eggs and have been doing that now for about 8 years. And I can assure you they are, it's a hassle. It's a pain. We don't like it. But I can tell you these birds are substantially better than the ones that we can get from the hatcheries, even the good hatcheries. They're more docile, they're smarter, they're a little bit heavier bodied, and so it just makes sense that if you move your genetic base farther into a system that resembles what you're wanting out the other end, that over time you're going to develop a better fit. And so we are still buying our meat birds, our Cornish cross. We're still buying those from commercial hatcheries, but we have definitely moved into an internal sustaining our own hatch, our own chicks. And everybody that sees these, they want some. We haven't sold any yet. We haven't, because right now this year will be the first year that we haven't bought any pullets, any little chick pullets from a hatchery. So we're just now getting to a scale that hopefully we'll be able to produce all of our own chicks. And frankly, the skill of it. You would think that these little incubators with all their little computer microchips and humidity and controlled egg things, you'd think they'd be all perfect, but they're not. There's still an art to it.
For sure. Do you have any problems? Not problems. Wow. Do you have any thoughts about maybe trying to breed your own meat birds? And I get, like we've got, let's say 28 chickens, and I'm not the chicken person here. Trust me, I'm not the chicken person, but I can see the difference between, between some of the crossbreeds that we have running around and what a straight run Cornish cross does and how fast they gain. There's no doubt in my mind that, those Cornish cross birds are definitely a much, much more efficient feed converter. But it also seems like they're just don't have as much going on upstairs as, some of the red birds or the barred rocks or anything else.
Oh, for sure. Well, so I think the answer is two things. One is obviously, we're hatching our own pullets. So if you need 3,000 pullets a year, well, guess what? You're also going to have 3,000 cockerels. Okay. And so we have the cockerels, the little male chicks. And so we have raised them up, and we sell them everything from pet food to as gourmet like heritage breeds birds, which is probably not exactly true, but they're like that. And so certainly we like those birds. So if we couldn't get them from a hatchery, we could certainly eat the roosters. As we say, we could eat the brothers of the sisters. and so, that's certainly an option. But beyond that, until then, we do get chicks. We do get the meat birds from a hatchery, and those birds are more saleable in today's market. So, one of the things about marketing is that you can't be but so weird. You can be a nudist and you can be a Buddhist, but if you're a nudist Buddhist, you're just too weird. No, nobody believes you. And so even among the foodie gourmands, the foodie aficionados, by and large, they still want that nice big double breast. They still want that nice big plump chicken. And and so we just from a marketing standpoint, we continue to patronize the what we call the race car NASCAR high octane double breasted bird. We still maintain that just from a market share. If that became unavailable, then we'd go back to the roosters of the brothers of the sisters.
And that all makes sense. That totally makes sense. And I think that dual purpose breeding is starting to come back in style, not just for cattle. We need to start breeding our cattle to do better on forage, higher milk production numbers on less. And,
Sure.
I'm not familiar at all with hogs. Like I don't do hogs. My experience with hogs was limited to the mid 90s when I was working for a neighboring crop farmer. I think they still grow certified seed wheat, but they had some pigs. And this was like the 94, 95 time frame, right before the bottom fell out of the hog market. And I remember farrowing houses. I remember having to go clean out farrowing houses and, remove dead sows, remove dead piglets. And that's probably one of the core memories for me. And that's one of the reasons that I don't think I'd ever really want to be involved in any sort of hog type system or hog type CAFO. So, all right, well, I boxed myself into a corner. So tell me about your pigs, since we're talking about pigs.
Yeah, so our pigs, obviously they don't come from a CAFO, and we buy our piggies from people who breed on pasture. They actually farrow on pasture, or at least in pods where there are numerous sows, or where everything can run around. And so it's certainly not a crate, not a confinement house, not a factory situation. And we don't farrow here at our farm. Again, we don't have anything against farrowing. It's just that our farm gets somewhere close to 15,000 visitors a year, and a lot of kids, and a lot of moms that are stuck on their iPhone while their little 2-year-old climbs up into the pen with the sow, steps on a little baby pig, and then the sow eats the child. And next week there's a big front page article about local toddler eaten by sow at local farm. We don't want that kind of publicity. And so we buy our piggies from farms that don't have visitors, and we supply them a nice steady price and keep them in business. And we get to put all of our attention on production stock. So we get weaner piggies, 40 to 50 pounds, and then we raise them on up to slaughter size. And so, and of course we raise them on pasture. In the dead of winter, yes, they are inside, but they're on they have large areas to run, deep bedding that they can dig in and burrow down in. They get hay every day. They can eat half of it and poop on the other half. And so it's a very sanitary, clean smelling kind of situation. And so, yeah, pigs, they definitely in their worst smelling scenario, they are the worst of all the livestock. That's for sure. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can put a carbonaceous diaper under them with wood chips and sawdust and straw and stuff, and soak up all that bedding, and it can be very very enjoyable.
For sure. So, do you think too many people get caught up in the mechanics of your message and not see the forest for the trees, trying to replicate what you're doing in some part without understanding the why or the whole system?
Well, yeah, I think so. The why, the big picture nuance is kind of hard to grasp sometimes. And so what you do is you pick some ingredients, and you start baking the cake. And sometimes you don't know why you're baking the cake. and that can be an issue. But often on your way in the mechanics, you start seeing the nuances of why. And so it's a bit of a a catch-22. What comes first? Do you just do the right thing and then you kind of learn why, or do you have to understand all the philosophical whys before you do the right thing? There's probably a little bit of both there. But I guess the thing, if there's one thing that on that topic, and I don't mean this to sound proudful or anything like that, but we have been at this a long time, and when I go visit somebody that's been successful at something for a long time, the first thing I want to do is assume that they've worked out a lot of the things. But you'd be amazed how many people they've never raised a chicken. They come and they take one look. Well, I'd change this. I'd change that. I'd change this. No, it's better to just duplicate first and become efficient at our system before you start making major changes. Like a lot of people, how do you move those shelters? Man, that's just so much work and labor to move those shelters all the time. And so people start, trying to make great big ones you move with a tractor, or put wheels on all of them, or automate them, or some such thing. And the fact is, there probably aren't, of all the thousands of people who have done this, there probably aren't, I'm going to say 10 in the whole country that have duplicated our benchmarks of efficiency. That requires you having, the right kind of construction on the shelter, moving them the right direction, having the right kind of dolly to move them, the right kind of technique to move them, the right kind of thinking about feed and water, and is it empty or full when you move them? I mean, the time of day to move them. There are a ton of nuances around this, and so, I'm open to changes, and we've certainly tried. When somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I think we've got a better," we've built them out of different material. We've made different dimensions. We've tried big ones and little ones and all sorts of things. And, we just come back to our little simple design and move them by hand. And you don't have to go to the gym for exercise.
That is one of the things about doing, quote, regenerative ag, is you're outside a lot more, less reliant on machinery, and doing a lot more physical type labor, and it helps keep you in shape. When I haven't done any strip grazing since 2020, but when I did it in 2020 and in 19 and 20, oh man, getting out and walking 18,000 steps first thing in the morning, yeah, that helps keep you going all day. Kind of helps put you in a positive mindset, a little physical activity outside in the sunshine, whether it's raining or sleeting or fog or snowing. We're out there. I will not build electric fence in a thunderstorm, though.
Yeah, that's very wise. I've had lightning come in on me a couple of times over the years, and yeah, it's not fun to build electric fence in a thunderstorm.
So one of the things I think I saw you say is the farm-to-table movement focuses on blaming the consumer for the problem in the food system. And whether or not that's your quote or not, it's something I think needs some discussion. Yes, the consumers get a vote with their food dollar, but I don't think that they're to blame for the problems in the current system.
Well, this is a good matter of discussion. I mean, ultimately, farmers produce what consumers want. They've always done that. The market drives the production, and so if consumers want convenience food and hot pockets and squeezable Velveeta cheese, that's what they get. And so until consumers start making the connection between their health and their food, and their health, their food, and the landscape, farmers aren't going to make that difference. And I think I can say this with some authority, because at our farm, we service institutions, restaurants, thousands of families. And but our weak link today, if you ask me, well, what's your weak link at Polyface? What's your weak link? My answer is very quick. Our weak link is market. We could double tomorrow if we, and I'm not whining. Don't read more into this. I'm not whining or complaining. I'm just stating a fact that we could double production tomorrow with our existing land base and personnel. Without doing much. The weak link is marketing. We need people to to connect the dots, that when they look at their plate. So I've kind of developed this kind of a metaphor. So when you sit down and you look at your plate, squint your eyes, look through the food. Some farm on the other side produced that food. Some landscape put that food on your plate. As you squint your eyes and you look through that food, what do you see? What kind of landscape do you see? And we start having to, we start, when you do that, you begin thinking intentionally about what you're doing. Now, I'm not trying to make a cult and saying, it's a sin to ever eat a Snickers bar. Okay. I like a Snickers bar as well as anybody else. All right. But it is probably a sin to eat one every single day. And so that's what I'm getting at. And I like the 80-20 rule, do 80 right, and 20 gives you enough that you can go to your, niece's birthday party and enjoy the Walmart cake, and not feel guilty about it. And so I'm looking for those 80-20 consumers who do connect the dots and are ready to take their intentional, landscape, their intentional landscape touch to that level.
Okay. So circling back, you said the market drives production, and I agree with that. But I think that our market, quote market, and what we're talking about here is the American food consuming public.
Yeah.
They've been manipulated and lied to by labels. I feel like they've been manipulated and lied to by label claims on packages. It goes back to things that I've kind of been talking about in other episodes, like enriched wheat flour. Okay, so we mill the germ off the wheat to take away all the good crap, and then we're going to enrich it with other crap from somewhere else. Where does that other stuff come from? And
Sure.
The American public doesn't think that's important. They just want to see that big claim up in the corner, enriched or fortified with, 13 vitamins and minerals. So, these labels and all these label claims, for a small operator like you and I, it's hard I'm not going to say it's hard. It's easy for me to go to the meat packer and have them put my brand, my name on the meat package label. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. But if I want to make any nutritional claims
Right.
or anything other than this is a piece of beef,
Mm-hmm.
I've got to go to the food police and show them this is what I want to say. This is my documentation that says that this is not bullshit. And this is the claim I want to make on my package.
Yep. That's right. And those customized nutritional claims are very, very expensive. $20,000 a piece, for example, just to get one. And so that's where you have to use your messaging to overcome that. So all I will say in this space is every person is responsible for the teachers and for the belief system they embrace. And what you're bringing up here is the it's the bane of the human existence. Why when we were starting our farm here in 1961, Dad brought in every agriculture expert, both public and private. Some he paid, some were just public people. Said, how do I make a living on this farm? Every single one of them said, build silos, borrow more money, plant corn, graze the wood lot, and use chemical fertilizer. Now, that was the advice that they were giving to every farmer out there. Dad didn't buy it. Why didn't Dad buy it? I mean, that's the question of the age, isn't it? Why does one person look at that label and say this is a bunch of crap, and the next person, maybe the next person says, well, I don't even believe labels. If there's something on it that I can't pronounce, I don't get that kind of food. And another person says, well, as much as I can, I'm gonna get food with a face. Know your farmer, know your food, kind of thing. And so I guess what I'm trying to, I hate victimhood. Well, I can't. I just don't know. I can't do this. I can't cook because I just don't have enough time. Meanwhile, they're sitting there watching 5 Netflix shows a night, and I just don't have time to cook. I mean, the average American male right now, Brian, the average American male spends 20 hours a week. That's the average American male between 25 and 35 years old spends 20 hours a week playing video games. So here is the average male between 25 and 35 playing video games. So I'm looking at that saying, so who's responsible for knowing something? If you took those 20 hours and you listened to the Ranching Reboot podcast, if you spent that time doing anything more productive than playing a video game,
listening to your books, listening to other podcasts.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. But I'm a guest on yours, so I'm going to promote yours. The point is, who's responsible for my body of belief and knowledge? And it's not some, and I think that this, yes, is there an orchestrated, conspiracy effort to make ignorant, absolutely. The industry loves ignorant people. The government loves ignorant people. Okay. Power loves ignorant people. There's a lot of money to be made with ignorant people. Okay. I totally get that. But you and I, for some reason, you and I have exposed ourselves. We didn't take the red pill. You and I have pushed ourselves to expose ourselves to the road less traveled by, to the different drummer. I mean, there's a ton of little things, cliches that you can put to go the path, the unorthodox path. And we have found it, satisfying. I will tell you this, that in the early, I'm going to say in the 80s and 90s, almost everybody that came to visit our farm was basically a liberal Democrat, tree hugger, Gaia worshiping, tree hugger. Okay. Then guess what? Along came the homeschooling movement. And the homeschooling movement suddenly shifted our customer base and people who came and were interested in what we were doing. Yeah, we still have we love them, the liberal tree hugger, earth muffin, but now we have this huge contingency of very conservative. A lot of them are church oriented, very homeschoolers, and what I think happens is each of us has this, this kind of path that we're on. And if you're on a very conventional path, at some point in your life, you're going to intersect with something unconventional. It might be medical, it might be agricultural, it might be food, it might be investment, it might be financial, it might be educational or recreational, but you're going to intersect with something that's unorthodox. How do you respond to that? You say, "Oh, that's that." Those are the stupid people. Those are idiot people. Or do you say, "Hey, I'm gonna dig into this a little bit. Let me try to find this." And what I saw was that the homeschooling movement spawned, it awakened. So people got fed up with the public schools. They started homeschooling, and they were so happy with what they saw with this, even though it was more work and more effort and it wasn't convenient. They said, "Well, I like what I see. My kids aren't bringing home a bunch of bad habits. My kids are self-confident, and they have interest." And they said, "Well, that was really satisfying. I wonder what else I'm missing." Next thing you know, they've got a garden, then a grain mill, a milk cow, and they're canning tomatoes, and they're going down this other path, other things. And then the next thing you know, they're going to an acupuncturist and a chiropractor and taking fewer medicines, and growing some herbs outside their back door, and so it's that kind of response when you intersect with the unorthodox. It's that response that determines, are you going to be blessed with additional discovery, or are you going to shut that door and say, "Nah, I'm just going to swim downstream and it'll all be easier"?
You hit on some great points there. So my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, homeschooled her daughter through middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And just like you said, she didn't bring home a bunch of bad habits from everybody else's kids.
Right.
Another word I usually throw in there, but I'll leave it out for this podcast. And then when she got to high school, she was much better mentally prepared and emotionally prepared to deal with, with all the crap that happens in high school during those years.
Yep.
And she's an awesome adjusted human. She's at Kansas State University in the architecture program, and she's supporting herself through college. I mean, through a job and through scholarships. Yeah, I think she's an awesome kid. And there's no doubt in my mind that she would not be on the path she's on if she would have gone to public school for all of those years. And it almost seems like I kind of just got this idea, and it's not only about half formed, that homeschooling is a gateway drug to libertarianism and homesteading food culture.
Yes, absolutely. And if you go to a current homeschooling convention, every state has their homeschooling conventions. If you go, where people buy curriculums and all this stuff, and you will see everything there from alternative medical insurance to alternative finance to alternative to libertarian type politics. Now it has broadened, and that's why I think this idea. And you know what? I'm so appreciative of you. I've never said this before, so that's indicative of a great question when you tease out a kind of a new nuance of thinking. But I've never articulated that idea of a pathway of life that intersects with the unorthodox. Let's just let that think for a minute. Your pathway of life, it intersects with the unorthodox. What do you do with that? And goodness, in a time of incredible censorship and shutting down the minority view, that is a profound question for every single person to ask. How do I respond when my life intersects with the unorthodox?
Very good question. And I think a lot of people are not prepared for that intersection of the unorthodox, and they fall back into a comfortable, predictable, easy pattern, because easy, comforting answers, even though they're a lie, are a lot easier to swallow than any sort of uncomfortable truth that what you've been taught your whole life is wrong, or everything, or most everything you know about the world and how the world works is wrong, because you've been lied to your whole life by the people that are in charge of the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, peer dependency. Peer dependency is affects everyone. And I've been very clear over the years that one of my greatest blessings was growing up in a home that actually embraced being different. Most people are trying to wear the right fashion, invest in the right places, buy the right things, have the right entertainment stuff, go to the right places in vacation, all that sort of thing. And our family truly embraced being different. And I'm so grateful. And what happened to your daughter? A part of that is adoption of value systems. Value systems are like muscles. They come on, they start as a little infant and they get stronger and stronger. And generally, value systems are not in place until about 9 years old. Obviously it differs, some get it earlier, some are later, but around 9 is where your kind of your conscience, what's right, what's wrong, what's tempting and what's tempting that's enticing, and what's tempting that's, ooh, I would never do that. Those kinds of things actually begin forming, or actually kids can formulate those somewhere 9-10 years old. And so your daughter, by homeschooling early, by the time she got thrown to the dogs in school, she was solid. She knew who she was. She knew what she believed. And so that's why you saw her just, with a true north, navigate through that, that peer pressure and all the temptations. She just navigated through. She's going to be a fantastic lady. And obviously you see that. And so it's that value system. It takes time to develop.
And it develops, like you said, it starts to develop when they're about 9-10 years old, which really corresponds with 5th grade, which out here in the near West or Midwest, whatever you want to call it, that's when they start middle school.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We thought it was really important to, to control the influences in her life in that really critical period.
Yeah.
Because, I I had experiences working with some other young people that were homeschooled, that were in their late teens, early 20s, and even in their mid-teens. And they were just, they were respectful. They knew how to talk to an adult. They knew how to deal with an adult. And that comes from during that critical period from, 9 to 15 of going with your parent.
Yeah.
And observing how they talk to people. Go with them to a business deal and observe how they do a business deal. Like,
right.
Those kind of things are invaluable at that age, but in the public school system, it's non-existent. It's completely non-existent. And that's a problem. And during that time frame, children are learning things, they're discovering things about their bodies, they're discovering things about society, they're learning, new words. Well, you want to be cool at school, right? So you want to go tell everybody this cool thing that your bigger brother told you, or that, big sister told you, or that you accidentally saw.
Yeah.
Might be above your age. You want to be cool, so you're going to go tell all your friends.
Yeah.
And it without really having the mental capacity maybe to understand some of these things you're seeing, and without an adult around to explain them to you. Because, let's be honest, everybody knows you're a libertarian. Everybody that listens to my podcast, by now, I'm pretty sure they've got a clue. If not, hey, I'm a libertarian, voted that way for over 20 years. But I don't like to get overly, I don't like to really get political, because everybody has a choice. And I think a lot of libertarians maybe give some of the rest of us a bad name, and hell, maybe we're in that camp too and don't even know it. But, it's about freedom and personal responsibility, which is why libertarianism and the homeschool movement kind of play hand in hand. And it's also teaching a lot of self-reliance. So, I forgot where I was going with that one again. So as we breed these cultures of self-reliance, we're starting to see more and more homesteaders, more and more people that are very interested in taking ownership of their food and of their health. And as we start seeing let's just say it, big money or tech money, fleeing the cities, fleeing the West Coast, and they're coming to areas where land is cheaper. Yep. And that's pretty much mostly a lot of the area between you and I. How do you see, well, I see it becoming more and more difficult to make a living in agriculture because land prices keep going up, input prices keep going up, labor prices, like, wow, they're just totally out of control. And I don't think that any current system adequately addresses the land and labor economics of food production in a natural setting. So I guess the other piece of that is we've so heavily subsidized production agriculture for so long: corn, wheat, and beans. You know, the three major commodity crops. Okay, we can use corn to make ethanol, then we can take those distillers' grains and we can feed them to cows, and they do fantastic. It's very difficult to compete in a low input system on, let's just say, native range against the guy that's got an ethanol plant next door, and then he gets that subsidized waste stream from the ethanol plant. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, you've got several threads there, and so I think you and I would agree that whenever the government intervenes in a marketplace, it skews what Adam Smith called the invisible hand of the market, to go where it wants to go. And so I certainly don't have any problem with ethanol. I don't have any problem with actually, I don't really have a big problem with growing corn or beans. I certainly don't have any problem with growing cows on pasture. But the problem is when the government starts throwing money at one side or the other, it skews. It has a ripple effect of skewing throughout the marketplace all the things related to that item. And so I would like to eliminate every single manipulative thing, from subsidy to insurance to grants to anything. In fact, in my perfect world, I just abolish the USDA, but I know that's not going to happen. But if we could eliminate the skewing in the market, and that includes who can sell and who can't. For example, if you came to my farm, looked around, asked around, and as two voluntary consenting adults, we wanted to transact a pig that I'd butchered, or some bologna I'd made, or some chicken broth that I'd made, I can't sell it to you without a government approved label and facility that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so the result is that there are probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of entrepreneurial farmers of every scale, big to small, who are ready to service their neighborhoods and communities with good food, who can't because the food police regulate them out of business because the food safety laws are scale prejudicial. They are much easier to comply with if you're big than if you're small. And so that becomes a very market manipulative thing. If to enter the market, you have to be at a certain scale to enter the market, that then prohibits entrepreneurs and embryonic startups from being able to enter the market, which obviously skews the pricing. So, I'm totally with you that the system, if you will, the system is definitely stacked against ecologically based, certainly small scale based, and direct market based. If we take those three, the ecology, the scale, and the direct market, it's skewed against all of those things, and therefore makes a very unfair playing field. So that's one element to it. But the second thing I think that's important, so you look at that and say, well, my lands, how am I going to change that? I'm a Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of them is don't spend your time worrying about the stuff that you can't influence. Let's focus on the things that you can. So what can I influence? And so what I can influence is the way I farm. And so what's happening is there is a tremendous amount of abandoned land right now as farmers age out. The average farmer is now 60 years old. So a lot of land is being inherited by kids that don't want to farm. Or it's still owned by very, very elderly people that are trying to figure out how to get out. And the problem is that when the price of entry is so big that young people can't get in, then old people can't get out. So both generations are stuck here. One wanting in, they can't. The other one wanting exit, and they can't get off, and they're both stuck here. So one of the options that we're seeing, and it's being used more and more, is using portable infrastructure to manage land. So in other words, rather than having a feedlot, for example, to finish beef, you finish them on grass using electric fence, a portable electric fence. Guess what? That can be done on land you don't own with portable infrastructure, so that if your arrangement goes south, if your deal breaks, if you have a divorce, you can easily take all your portable electric fence and a water trough, and you can take that somewhere else, as opposed to a stationary, a typical stationary barn, feedlot, blah blah blah. And so our pastured poultry, all the infrastructure is portable. Pastured pigs, it's portable. Turkeys, it's portable. And so we're seeing now a lot of young farmers accessing this newly available land from aging out farm situations with a mobile arrangement that allows them to get a toehold and a foothold in agriculture without owning land. In fact, the people that I read after take a very strong position that land ownership and farming are two completely different businesses. They're two completely separate businesses. One of my mentors, Alan Nation, founder of Stockman Grass Farmer, he said that the U.S. is moving toward a European system where people with money buy land as a defensive measure, because land tends to not go down in value over time, and so the land is being owned by, as you said, this money coming out of the cities. Okay, now some of those want to farm. Most of them don't have a clue what they're doing, and some of them are looking. They're actually looking. We've helped about 6 people actually find property for us to manage. So they now have their what I call their agrarian bunker if the wheels fall off. And we're able to expand our farming operation on land that's cheap, that we don't own, as a collaboration with city money being injected into rural property as a safe haven. And so yeah, definitely the land price ratio, the ratio of price to production value is completely different now than it was 60 years ago. When mom and dad bought this place, it was $90 an acre, and a feeder calf sold for $180, and you could raise half of one on an acre. So that was a $90 of production and a market price of $90 an acre. That's a 1-to-1 market price to annual production ratio. Today, the land is $7,000 an acre, and that feeder calf is $700. You can still raise half of it on an acre, so that's $350. So instead of a 1-to-1 ratio, it's a 20-to-1 ratio, and that's why you can't do what Grandpa did.
That's a good way to put it. And okay, so in my context, where I am, I'm on the very northeast edge of what we call the Red Hills. So it's it's still native range because it was too steep and too rough to farm. Of the acres that I have, less than 7% of it was ever broken out with a plow, and the last of it was put back to grass in the late 80s. So I feel pretty fortunate that I have a resource that, as long as I steward it correctly, will be there year after year after year after
Right.
year after year.
Right.
But I think in the context of, okay, what are most of my I'm going to do it the way Grandpa did it. Just a few miles north of me, get up into Pratt County, everything is tillage. Almost everything is tillage up there. Lots of center pivot irrigation. And I hear that a lot. Well, this is what we're doing because this is how Grandpa did it. Grandpa farmed here, so I'm going to keep farming here, and this is how he did it. And in a lot of those situations, you'll have somebody that's farming and their family's been farming for, I don't know, 50, 80, 100 years. And they're farming some of their own land, but their
Mhm.
own land is the minority. They're farming for, other landowners. They're a tenant, they're on crop share, whatever. Those systems and those relationships tend to incentivize production at all costs, because it's yield, dollars per acre. The landowner wants to get their check at the end of the year, right? The farmer's got to be able to stay in business.
Sure.
But that completely ignores any of the ecological or environmental costs in that style of production. So I can't remember where it was we talked about it. It might be in the next episode. But we talk about like soil erosion. Like,
Mm.
so like, just here's the quick math is the average production commodity field in the United States is going to lose roughly 5 tons of topsoil per acre. 5 tons of topsoil per acre is about as thick as this sheet of paper.
Yeah. Is that per year?
Yeah, 5 tons an acre a year. And that's roughly a sheet of paper. That's the thickness of a sheet of paper on an acre. Now, I know where there's a quarry around. I know somebody's got a dump truck. Be happy to sell you all the dirt you want at $10 a ton, and that truck's probably going to cost $200 to $250 an hour to run. So why are farmers letting their most valuable asset wash down our creeks and rivers and fill up our ponds and dams? If it's minimum $50 an acre replacement cost for that soil, and as a farmer, you realize I get to take sun and water and all these chemicals that my salesman sold me and these really high priced seeds that this other salesman sold me and put it in this soil and it'll grow. The part of that I think they're missing is the soil. And I don't think that there's a farmer alive. I don't think there's a farmer in the United States that could afford to put $50 worth of soil back on their field every year.
I think you're exactly right. And of course, that country where you are was broken long after where I am here in Virginia. Where I am, by the time we got to our farm, somewhere between 3 and 5 feet of topsoil had washed off. And there were many areas on our farm when we measured one 16-foot deep gully. In other words, from the bottom to the rim on top, 16-foot deep gully. You know how much soil that is? And we had those and still do. So many of them, they're now forested. We planted trees on them. They're not eroding anymore, but the gullies are still there. I can take you there and we can walk across these gullies, on these hillsides. And I'm always thinking when I see those, what were those people thinking? They were good Methodists and Presbyterians and Lutherans, and they were going and, putting money in the offering plate to send to a mission in Africa or, India or Pakistan. Meanwhile, their entire responsibility of their stewardship was washing down the river. What were they thinking? And I've wrestled with that a long time, and I think it's just because, well, Sir Albert Howard, who wrote an agricultural testament, basically, is considered the godfather of of the modern, sustainable ag movement, because he, in his lifetime of work, he developed the scientific recipe for composting, aerobic composting. He said in Agricultural Testament, written in 1943 or published in 1943, he said, "It is the temptation of every civilization to take what nature spent thousands of years creating and convert it to cash."
I believe that's right.
Yeah, and I think it's just like erosion in so many things. I mean erosion of the money supply. I mean, look at, isn't somebody concerned that in the last 12 months, our dollar lost like 13% of its purchasing power? So your savings, your $100,000 savings that you had are now only worth, $85,000. That's erosion. But as a culture, it happens, whatever, slow enough. We see an erosion. Well, you start talking about erosion, we see erosion in our nutrition. We see erosion in our health robustness. Look at the, in our mental health. Look at the teen suicide rate. There is erosion in all sorts of places, and I think the problem with the word with erosion is that it indicates a change that is slow enough that it's not catastrophic enough to see. We only respond to things when they become catastrophic, and unless it's catastrophic, we don't respond. And so, as you said, it's easier just to go along, just to whatever, do tomorrow what you did today, right? Routine is fun. And so erosion is just slow enough that it doesn't excite response. And I think that's the way farmers view this. I mean, we got, whoa, we got the bills paid another year, and that's basically the mentality. And it's very, very unfortunate. But again, I agree with you. I mean, I think that the role that all these government programs and manipulative picking winners, what they do, I mean, that if my cow dies, there's no USDA agriculture insurance to protect me from my cow dying. But if grasshoppers eat my corn, there is. That's an unfair advantage to the corn grower versus the cow versus the guy that's running his cows on grass.
If a wildfire came through right now and burned up all my grass,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to figure that out.
Wow. Wow.
I have a neighbor that's got more cows than I have,
Mm-hmm.
in basically a feedlot at their house.
Yep.
Big
Yep.
hay pile.
Mm-hmm.
Same fire comes through and wipes out their hay pile. Guess what? I mean, after all the donated hay comes in, they get money thrown at them to go replace their commodity hay. But they won't even think about looking at my grasslands. It'll be 6 months later by the time they come out to even talk to me about it, and I'll be in the middle of the growing season.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be like, well, where's the damage? Well, the damage was the 2 months that I had to figure out an alternative feeding arrangement for my cows until I grew grass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back to government. You said, some of the comments you made, and I'll say this: government sets the barrier to entry. They set a fairly high barrier to entry, no matter what you want. Again, whether it's a commercial kitchen, killing your own chickens, killing your own cows. That's a fairly high barrier to entry. But at the same time, they create this barrier to entry that keeps a lot of the small players out. They also don't create a standard of excellence. The problem with government standards is that is the minimum performance standard that you must meet, not the maximum, not the greatest, not even something that's pretty good. It's the minimum standard. So I feel like we have a lot of these, multinational companies that, conglomerates, and not just the big four meat companies, the ag chemical companies, the seed companies. I mean, they're all kind of intertwined anyway. They're not performing to the highest standard they can. They're performing to the minimum standard that the government will allow them to get away with. And what kind of comes to mind is there's a presentation that I sat through about small meat plants, and there's the test to pass program and the test to fail type program. And what some of these smaller operators are finding is if they use a test to fail program versus a test to pass program, they end up with a much higher quality product, but they spend a lot of money on testing. So what I mean by that is when you are testing to fail, you test and you don't find any contamination in your plant. You keep testing, you keep testing, you keep testing until you do find some. And then you can go root the cause out of that contamination and put processes in place so it doesn't happen again. When you're testing just for the minimum standard and doing the minimum amount of tests that you're required to do, for the year in order to keep your, whatever kind of certification you have, whether it's on a packing plant or a commercial kitchen or a secondary processing facility,
Right.
a lot of them will just do the minimum amount of tests required by law. And then when they do get a test that fails or detects some contaminant or contagion, they have to recall a bunch of product because they didn't catch it. Like, oh, we've maybe had this problem for 3 months. Well, we better recall 500,000 pounds of meat and throw it away. That's nothing for Tyson, JBS, or any of the other big nationals. For a small plant, that's death. So I think these small plants are in more of a regime where they're testing to fail to find their own internal process controls because they can't afford a recall. Then as that business scales up and becomes a for-profit business, somebody in that board is going to look at, well, why are we spending all this money on testing and we're not ever failing anything? We need to cut that back to increase our profits.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, and I think you're basically right. We co-own a small federal inspected slaughterhouse here that we use for our beef and pork and stuff, and for sure the standards that we have in place are substantially higher. It's far cleaner than a big outfit. And you're exactly right. It's partly because we can't afford to shut down for a week. We can't afford a recall, and we're not connected to be able to handle the politics of being able to deal with those kinds of things. And so yeah, so the point is that as a business, we are far more vulnerable. We're far more vulnerable to a shock than the great big outfit that is politically connected, and can get stuff handled easier just because they're politically connected. I mean, you got to realize when you see a big recall in the marketplace, there were a lot of negotiations in the back room as to just how that was going to roll out. That's not just some inspector, some honest government agent saying, here's what you got to do. No, there are senators and congressmen and legislative aides and all sorts of people involved. When it's a big outfit, when it's a little outfit, no, they just throw the book at you because you're not politically connected. But when you're a big outfit, you
suppose some of those senators are getting involved in that process because they're shareholders in those meat companies?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, and that's why, I mean, the whole regulatory environment is what we call a revolving door. People from the industry go into the regulatory environment, right? I mean, the fact that the head of the head of Pfizer, the head of Pfizer is now in charge of this of the COVID vaccine program from the government. I mean, it's a Michael Taylor became the food czar under Obama. Well, Michael Taylor, his career was with Monsanto. He was the lead attorney in bringing genetically modified organisms to the world, and now he's our food czar. I mean, really? So that's the kind of thing. It's incestuous. It's a fraternity of incestuous players that locks out politically and practically the smaller player, and that's why all these things are written scaled prejudicially, and so that creates again a very unfair. It would be like for the listeners here, maybe it'd be good to say, I mean, we're here we are at the end of the NFL season. So can you imagine if in order to play a football game, you could not do a pickup game in anybody's backyard? The only place that you could play football is on an official NFL stadium with a paid referee. Doesn't matter whether you're a group of Sunday school kids that want to play a pickup game of football, a family outing where all the cousins get together. Let's go out and play football. No. You can only play football on an NFL field and with a official credentialed referee to referee the game. That's what we've got right now in the food system. You can only play if you're on an accredited field with a government referee. That's the only way you can play the game. And can you imagine if we had that kind of system with football? Where would people innovate moves and learn how to handle a football and do plays and have the enjoyment of the football? Where would the feedstock be to come into the to the players?
Talent.
Yeah, to develop the talent. And that's exactly where we are in the food system. People like us, listen, many, many, many years ago, the government came in, they said, your outdoor chicken processing is inherently hazardous. You can't produce a safe chicken if you process the chicken in an open air facility. Well, we had our chickens tested for bacterial contamination. Our chickens averaged 133 cultured bacterial units per milliliter. I'm already past my my pay grade on it, but that's how they measure it. Ours measured 133. That's what you got to remember of colony forming units. And the supermarket birds from the same lab, same day, same everything, tested 3,600. 3,600. So we've got 3,600 colony forming units versus 133. So we weren't sterile. We don't want to be sterile, but look, we were 25 times cleaner than what's in the store. Now you would think that somebody in the food inspection business would say, "Wow, how can you get chickens that clean? Let's maybe we ought to change protocols and see if we can get chickens that clean." But it didn't influence them one iota in our negotiations and discussions that we were that much cleaner. And even though we did it without chlorine and the supermarket chicken had 40 chlorine baths, it was still that much dirtier than ours. And so so we have answers. We have answers to the salmonella. We have answers to the E. coli. We have answer to the contagion, the pathogens that are in food. I'm saying we small producers, we pastured poultry, we unorthodox alternative producers, we have answers. We're the sandlot players. We're the backyard. We're the ones out here innovating and fooling around with this. And if we can't play the game can't advance creatively to solve problems, because it can only move at the rate, pace, and creativity of the bureaucracies. And that's a very slow pace.
It's a good segue into talking about some ways to kind of skirt around food police rules in order to put, beef, pork, chicken, any other proteins, eggs, or any other farm produce in the hands of consumers. And one of my favorite books that you've written is Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I almost want to wear the title on a medallion around my neck. Everything I want to do is illegal. And the other one, of course, is folks, this ain't normal.
Yeah.
So, how do we deal with the food police, I guess, as a small producer that wants to be direct to consumer, which I feel that's kind of what my listenership is represented by, is people that want to do more direct to consumer sales. We're looking at trying to get out of the city and come out in a homestead.
So, wow, it's a great question here. Let me just jump right into it quickly by saying that we now have, John Moody and I, 3 or 4 years ago, started what we call the Rogue Food Conference, and our mantra is circumvention, not compliance. There comes a time when tyranny or regulation becomes so stifling, it is actually more efficient to figure out how to circumvent it than how to comply. And we are kind of at that point today. That's a little bit of what led the homeschooling movement. They tried to work within the public school system. And then somebody said, you know what, forget it. Let's just circumvent it. Let's do something different. And you see that in various things, throughout history. And so we're at that point in food where, as you described, the food police for a small direct market producer has become so onerous that we actually might get along better instead of trying to get the license. Just forget the license and do something different. So the Rogue Food Conference that we've had 5 of them. The 6th one is going to be May 12 and 13 here at Polyface, and we invite everybody to come. I get a shameless plug for it. And what we're doing is we're putting on the stage people who have figured out how to circumvent the regulations. So let me just throw a couple of them out there. We're all familiar with community supported agriculture and the whole raw milk herd share, that sort of thing, the subscription service. So that is kind of the
Hold it back. Okay, maybe some of us aren't familiar with that. Can you give us the 30,000-foot view of what you just said, the herd share, milk share?
Yeah. Okay. So in Virginia, it's illegal to sell a glass of raw milk. You can't sell raw milk. But what you can do is you can invest in a herd and get a herd share. So you can get so just like community supported agriculture, CSA, where I invest in a share of that farm. I pay $500, and that gives me a box of vegetables every week through the summer. The reason that is not a sale is because there is a shared risk on both producer and buyer. So it's not a sale, it's an investment. So the produce is not a product that you're buying, it's a dividend. It's a dividend from your investment. In other words, if you buy a $500 produce CSA, for example, and grasshoppers come and wipe out the tomatoes, and you say, hey, look, I didn't get my tomatoes, I want my money back. The farmer says, sorry, you didn't buy tomatoes, you invested in my farm. This was a dividend. So where the government has control with the food police is in transactions that are seller buyer, not investor dividend receiver. There's a dramatic difference between buyer seller and investor dividend receiver.
I just wrote down food as a dividend of land investment.
Yes, exactly. So it's not a buy sell, it's an investment dividend. That's a totally different thing. And so that permutation has been used in the CSAs. It's now used in the herd share, and it's now been extended in a kind of a new refinement into the PMA, which stands for Private Membership Association. Private Membership Association, and these are basically modeled after country clubs. So a golf country club. So think about this. In a golf country club, you join as a member, and you then receive services as a perk of membership. Okay, so you're not actually buying services. You are receiving benefits from your membership.
Right. Like, you don't have to rent a golf cart. One's provided for you. There's a caddy there with your clubs, somebody to shine your shoes. Yeah. Depending on the level and yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the PMA, the Private Membership Association, is a mechanism now for food that people are doing. We're actually looking at this as a kind of a side hustle here at our place, to circumvent all the food laws. You don't, and your employees become ministers, and so you don't take Social Security, you don't do workman's comp, you don't take sales tax. There's no inspection because it's a completely private membership association. And a lot of people don't realize there are, I think, 17 nonprofits. And so this kind of utilizes the 501, like 11 and 12 or something like that. I'm getting over my pay grade here, but there is now an entire network. There is a burgeoning network that is developing, that is putting together personal membership associations for people. The catalyst or the lightning rod for this is Amos Miller. I don't know if you've heard about Amos Miller and his things. And so he had a 4,000 member PMA in Pennsylvania, and he's just been through the courts and won. So the PMA is a fairly new one. There's another one. Neethi Bali in North Carolina has started a food church. So there, you join her food church, and you get the benefits of membership, which include getting food. It's totally uninspected, nothing. Okay. So, I can butcher a beef and sell steaks, and there's no inspection, no requirement whatsoever. If I'm a member of this food church. There's another idea that's being floated, and that is to sell a class. So imagine I want to sell my beef directly to people. Okay, so my customers sign up for a butchery class. I butcher the beef on the farm, cut it up, and if you take the class for $100, you get a box of meat. So you're buying a butchery class that you can take online, and then here comes a box of meat to you. And so it's as a part of taking the class. So you're selling information and giving away product. So there are numerous of these kinds of circumventions developing. It's an exciting space, and the Rogue Food Conference is all about shining a spotlight on the successful ones that people are doing. Of course, it runs the government agents crazy. Government agents go crazy over this, and you may or may not get a visit depending, but I'm very excited about this guerrilla marketing, under the radar, almost a black market system that's developing to create space for exactly the kind of person you're talking about, who is trying to get some beef or some pork or something to their neighbors, and they're stifled by either they can't get into a slaughterhouse because there aren't enough slaughterhouses, or to get there legally, there's too many hoops to run through, and so the localized commerce never happens because it's just too difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. So circling back to your food church comment, the first thing that came to my mind, food church, we've been talking about food police, is, there's something in one of those documents that kind of governs how our country is run and supposed to be, that says that there's supposed to be a separation of church and state. And, thinking about that food church concept, another thought that came to mind is patriotism. And I think a lot of folks have the wrong idea about what patriotism is and isn't. Patriotism is not the love of your government. Patriotism is not the love of your politicians. Patriotism is the love of your country. Patriotism is the religion of the soil. So those just really struck me when you're talking about the concept of a food church, and I'm kind of rolling around in my head. Okay, food church. I could be the minister of the plains, and maybe have some insulation from the government because of the separation of church and state, or maybe that's just a big reach. But I felt
no, that's exactly it. It's in other words, the basic concept is that my beliefs require that I eat this kind of food. And so you go into it, from your beliefs. It's interesting, the permutations of the freedom of religion situation. For example, many years ago, I helped a lady here locally who was an atheist get religious exemption for her daughter, because she proved in court that atheism is a religion just as much as being a Methodist or a Presbyterian or a Lutheran. Atheism is a religion as well. And do you know they ended up having to grant her a religious exemption for homeschooling based on her atheistic beliefs? And so, the Constitution doesn't say it has to be Protestant. It doesn't say it has to be, a Christian denomination. And so these belief structures have been at the core of Supreme Court rulings about religion way more than, did Jesus exist, or do you believe the Bible? Rather, it has been based on belief, because the courts understand that this is not really about religion. I mean, a religion is a belief system. So when you come down to it, it's about beliefs, not whether you have a Bible in your home. And that's I think it's a little bit shocking sometimes to Christians to hear that. But that's the truth, and that's how broad that religious liberty is. It is really a wonderful thing, and has broad aspects.
So I'm losing my hair, have been for a long time. It's just, slowly, it's not retreating, it's just migrating a little bit.
Yeah.
Here, down here. I'm not self-conscious about it. I made the decision 20 years ago that I wasn't going to lose any sleep over it. Wasn't going to try to fight it. I don't need Rogaine. Like every male on my mother's side of the family for probably 5 generations has lost their freaking hair.
Yeah.
Like, why bother with it?
Right.
So I wear a hat a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All the time when I'm outside. So I would go in to get my driver's license several years ago. And, I sat down in the chair, and they're going to take my picture. And they're like, take your hat off. I'm like, I don't want to. Like, no, you got to take your hat off. Law says you got to take your hat off. Okay, fine. Took my hat off, took the picture. And then within 6 months, I start seeing pictures of, let's just say, women from another religion being allowed to wear their religious head coverings. And then they're allowed to have their face covered with just a little slit over their eyes. Hold on a minute. That doesn't make any sense. But what really makes me chuckle is there was a guy, I think he was up in Topeka, Kansas, who listed his religion as Pastafarian. and went in and got his picture taken at the DMV wearing a pasta strainer on his head and claimed religious exemption. And I think there was actually a fight about it, with the state of Kansas, and the state of Kansas eventually had to concede, okay, Pastafarianism is a valid religion. You're a member of it. You can wear your colander on your head in your DMV picture. I might have some details messed up, but it's at least a funny story.
Oh, that is a great story. That's a great story. And but you know, that kind of broadness, you know, I mean, I am a Christian, but I really appreciate that the courts. I appreciate when they interpret it broadly rather than narrowly. I think it's a more liberty-minded interpretation to deal with it broadly than narrowly.
Oh, for sure. But then you got to circle back to that 80-20 rule. Like, who are the laws made for? Are they made for the majority or for the minority? That 80-20 rule you brought up, I know it as the Pareto principle, and it just seems to be applicable in so many things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the questions that one of my fans asked was, they wanted to know about Venezuela and the move from Venezuela back to Virginia.
Huh. Okay. Well, wow. All right. I can go into that story. So my dad, flew in the Navy in World War II, and he was a Midwesterner, grew up in Indiana, and from just very, very young age, you know, preteen, he developed an intense interest in developing countries. And, you know, New Frontier, I mean, you know, Admiral Perry went to the, you know, the pole, and it was you know, he grew up in the 20s, and a time of or in the 30s, and a time 20s and 30s, time of discovery. And so he just had this idea, I'd like to farm in a developing country, not in the US. He didn't hate the US, but just he saw it as a new frontier, a new place. And let's do the new thing. And so, you know, how do you do that? You know, you're a Midwestern kid, no money, no connections. You know, how do you do this? And so after the war, GI Bill, he got his degree in economics. Went to Middlebury College in Vermont for 6 months, studied Spanish, hitchhiked from Vermont to Mexico, spent 6 months there with a family, boning up on his Spanish, came back, sat for the Foreign Service Civil Service exam in Spanish, passed it the first time through, and went as a bilingual accountant with Texas Oil Company to the early wildcat oil drilling ventures off the coast of Venezuela. This was, you know, the beginning of OPEC and the opening up. This is, you know, 1947, 48, 49. And make a long story short, he got there, and it was a very well-paying job. And in 7 years, he was able to save up enough money to buy a 1,000-acre property in the highlands of Venezuela, left the oil company, went to the farm, and the goal was to raise chickens and dairy. So meat, chickens, and dairy. And so we started with chickens. They go a little quicker. And meanwhile, my older brother was born. Then I was born. And we're cooking, you know. And what happens is that that in Venezuela, those indigenous chickens that they had, you know, running around the village sewers and squat pots and stuff, they all had kind of a nasal drip, a kind of a subtherapeutic pneumonia, you know, infectious kind of thing. And they would drip snot out of their noses. Well, you know, this is 1940, this is 1950s Venezuela. You know, the way the food, they didn't have Walmart and Costco. The way you got chicken, if you wanted chicken for dinner, you waited until the chicken vendor came around. So they'd have the banana vendor, the pineapple vendor, the papaya, the, you know, all the different things. And you would you know, dicker with that guy and buy his product, and you did cook it for dinner. Didn't have refrigeration and electricity and all that stuff. And so And so there was enough indigenous knowledge to know that if you wanted good chicken, you rubbed your finger down the beak and you looked at the nasal drip, and the driest ones were the healthiest when you went out back and butchered it. And so, of course, the vendors were always looking for a cleaner chicken, with less snot dripping out of its nostrils. Well, our chickens were clean. And Dad went and, how these Latin American markets are, the farmers bring their stuff to the village square
I've never been there.
Oh, okay. Well, you've seen pictures probably, but I mean, it's the same thing you see today in, Pakistan and Latin American countries. The farmers are in the town square and you have these people buying stuff. And so very quickly, Dad cornered the local market on chicken. All the vendors would line up, they'd buy his chicken because they were dry. Well, the other farmers, the neighbor farmers, they didn't ask him, how do you do this? They just said, we practiced witchcraft and voodoo, because that's the only way you can have a clean chicken is witchcraft and voodoo. So here we are, we're rocking along. 1959, there's a junta, a coup d'etat, and rebellion, uprising. And when you have anarchy in a culture, what happens is there are a lot of scores that get settled during anarchy that would never get settled otherwise when there's a rule of law. And so we got caught up in that. The neighbor farmers, oh, this is a way to get back at these gringos here. And so basically we fled the back door as the machine guns came in the front door, lost everything. They took over the farm, took everything. We couldn't get any protection whatsoever. We spent an extra 6 or 7 months there. After that, meeting with every the interior minister, the commerce secretary, the treasury secretary, the agriculture secretary. Nobody could give us any help. And so the only thing to do was to leave the country. We couldn't get any protection. And so we came back to the US, and Dad was there 12 years. He never got over it. He loved the people, loved the culture, and what is there not to love when pineapples and bananas grow wild in your yard? I mean, so as a little child, I actually spoke Spanish before English. In Venezuela. I was 4 when we left, so I don't remember the farm. I do remember the turmoil in Caracas and El Limon and a couple of the little villages where we went through as we were fleeing and getting out of there, and came back Easter Sunday, 1961. Dad was 39 and ready to start over. And I remember when I hit 39, I thought, man, if I lost everything, would I start over? And Dad really grew in my respect at that. And he'd already passed away. He died very young at 66. I was only 31 when he passed away. And I think a lot of it was the stress of he never got over that, that loss. But he was willing to restart here. Got this very, worn out, gullied rock pile. It was cheap. And we started over, but he never made a living from the farm. He was an accountant. Like I said, he was trained in economics. Mom was a school teacher, health and phys ed school teacher. And so the school teacher and the accountant got their money together off farm and paid the mortgage. So that by the time I was, 14 years old, it took us about 10 years of putting every dime into the mortgage. The farm was paid for. So now we have this, this big, this platform to experiment, to try things, to do things. And Dad was very much an experimenter, got a hold of some Andre Voisin stuff and went down this, this rotational grazing grass path early on, mobile infrastructure, and the rest is history. But that's the Venezuela story. And now our family looking back at that, it was extremely tragic at the time, but now looking back, we realize what a blessing it was, because if we had stayed, we'd have probably been very successful. Let's assume we'd have been successful and built a pretty sizable deal going on, and then nobody wants to be in Venezuela now, and so we now look back at that tragedy as a blessing that it got us out early, so we could start over and build something here that could last and not be subject to the, to the machinations of a junta.
Okay. Thanks for telling that story. I don't think I've heard most of that anywhere else. And you mentioned that the neighbors said you were practicing voodoo and witchcraft on your chickens.
Yeah.
And that brings to mind that several university professors, tenured university professors in the plains, have said that exact thing about, quote, rotation grazing, managed intensive grazing, or doing anything other than just set stock grazing. They say, oh, that's voodoo crap, that doesn't work. And okay, there's a reason why you've been at university for 25 years and haven't put out a meaningful paper that matters anything that wasn't sponsored by a chemical company.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
So I guess part of the reason I knew some of that you guys had to flee, that your family had to flee Venezuela because of, civil and governmental unrest.
Right.
And that's a great point that, when that anarchy starts to set in and the rule of law breaks down, people want to try to settle scores because there's nobody watching.
Right. Right.
And I realized that, you were very young when you left, but as a student of history, are we heading down the same path in this country?
Yes, I think we are. Now, what's important to understand is that before anarchy, you have tyranny. And so what happens is you get more and more. I mean, this is the path of Rome, right? This is what Rome, and so you have increasing government. I'll just say government intervention, whether it's regulations or manipulation or censorship or whatever. But you have increasing government control and activity in the society. And so you move toward tyranny more and more and more until finally that tyranny just falls of its own, either ineptness or people get tired of it, or black markets, whatever. It eventually it collapses, or it just gets overrun. I mean, in Rome's case, it was the Huns. I mean, they collapsed internally and then were weak, and then the Huns came in. But that cycle of history, the bondage to courage, courage to valor, valor to liberty, liberty to wealth, wealth to lethargy, lethargy to victimhood, and victimhood to back to bondage. That basic cycle has played out over and over and over throughout history. And I think that we do ourselves as Americans a great injustice. Look, I believe in American exceptionalism. I absolutely believe in American exceptionalism. There's no, you don't have to travel much in the world. I've traveled to, 20 different countries, doing seminars and things around the world. And it's profound, to go to a country and people are equally upset about things, but they don't have a Bill of Rights. They don't have a freedom of speech Bill of Rights. They don't have and so I do. Is our country perfect? Absolutely not. Of course it's not. But I do believe in that this was an experiment. It was an experiment by very wise just wise people that birthed it. And I think we do ourselves a disservice to think, oh, well, we're Americans, that'll never happen to us. We'll never collapse. Well, we'll never get taken over. And I think that's foolishness. I think the fact that it's happened over and over and over throughout history, we are absolutely as vulnerable to we're as vulnerable to the principles of civilizational cycles as any civilization in history, whether it's famine, disease, economic collapse, civil disorder, um, moral debauchery and chaos. We are as susceptible as anyone else. Gravity is everywhere, and nobody ever threw a ball so high that it didn't come down. And same with us.
Okay. I mean, there's nothing in there I can disagree with. I think the big question is time. The big question is time frame.
Absolutely.
Answer
Yeah.
that one.
No,
And
no, nobody can
we're not
answer
going to
the
see
time.
it while it's happening. We're not going to realize that it's begun until it's
Yeah.
almost done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not the hero of that story, and I don't think you are either. We're just NPCs watching it all play out from the sidelines.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so what that means is that I watch what's going on, but I don't go to marches, and I don't carry, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing stuff. And so if you and I wanted to make a list, if you and I wanted to make a list of stuff that we're angry and frustrated about, we could make a pretty decent list. All right. So I encourage people, make the list, make the list. All right. Here's what I'm angry and frustrated about. But now, instead of just being angry and frustrated, let's invert that. Let's flip it on its head. And instead of just feeding all this negative emotion, let's flip it on its head and build an ark. Let's build a light tower. So that when society becomes hopeless and helpless, we can provide hope and help at that time. And suddenly that takes all that negative energy, flips it to positive, and we actually build hope and help into a dysfunctional culture. Little arcs, little oases. And that's what I'm devoting myself to, and that's what I'm encouraging other people, so that we have these these neighborhoods, these communities of people that are resilient and can flourish even in a downtime.
Yes, 100%. I think that's the best thing that anybody can do, in the challenging times we're in, the post-COVID era, economic instability, people are moving around the globe. There's displacement from the Ukraine war, there's coming climate displacement, there's people that are, like we talked about earlier, there's big money leaving the cities, leaving the coasts, because they're not required to be in the office 5 days anymore.
Right.
There's a lot of people that can telecommute. If 3 years ago you told me that there would be software engineers that live in the mountains and commute to work on Starlink, I would say, what's Starlink?
Yeah.
If you've been hiding under a rock, Starlink is like, I don't know, Elon Musk has launched several thousand satellites that link up with lasers to provide internet from outer frickin' space.
Yeah.
And it's enabling people to go up and live in places where they couldn't, and do jobs that previously they were tied to a desk.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a very interesting time we're getting into. And so something that you mentioned earlier is the European model of tenancy, of land tenancy, where the people that own land, they own it as a defensive measure against inflation, and the people that without the money are managing the land as a wealth accumulation offensive measure. Can you maybe drill down into that a little bit? We'll try to explore that concept a little bit.
Yeah, I can. So
Well, I guess the direction that we could go with that is, if we're talking about a shared ownership model, who is accountable then for the stewardship of that resource? And how do we avoid a tragedy of the commons as we move towards a shared ownership model, or more of a tenant, a landowner tenant type relationship? And let me kind of, just give you some background where I'm at. Like, I own a portion of the ranch. I lease the rest of it from the family partnership. My dad's the trustee, and he basically lets me do whatever I want. I also manage it. and I'm the labor. So I'm in the unique, not the unique, I'm in a great position that, you know, if labor needs something from management, I don't have to write a report and justify it on a budget line item. And if ownership wants labor to do something weird, I've already talked myself into doing it. I don't have to, talk the manager into doing it. That has to talk the labor unit into doing it. And that kind of ties into my earlier point that, a lot of the people that are involved in commodity production farming now, they're tenants. And unless we have long-term shared management goals for our land, for ecological goals for our land, shared between ownership and management, then there's a big disconnect between those two layers and getting practices implemented that will actually, preserve the ecological bounty of the land or preserve the land base for future generations. Because like I talked about, that landowner, he wants his rent check. He wants his crop share check. Because to him, that's family land and he depends on that income every year, or whatever the CRP payment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm starting to push time here, just so you know. I've got a 1 o'clock, phone call. So yeah, what I'm describing, the European model is this tendency it's called tenureage. It's long-term tenureage. And so, for example, King Charles, doesn't farm all of his land. One of my most interesting weeks ever, I spent a week in the United Kingdom with a lord and a lady, their nobility actually, and they owned about 10,000 acres, which is pretty big in United Kingdom, England, and they had about 130 farm tenants. He showed me his spreadsheet. This guy here is at 37 years. This guy here is at 67. This guy here is at 23. This guy here is at 89. They're called 99-year tenurages, and they're inheritable. So 99 years is a long time. So you have this tenancy, and so they actually have tenancy boards, and so the landowner cannot increase. They're a little bit like rent boards in our country, where a landlord can't increase the rent but so much. I'm sure there's all sorts of formulas, but this actually was created as part of the Magna Carta. Goes back that far, where they said, you know what, we're going to let royalty, we're going to let nobles own the land, but you're going to have to, but you can't just raise the rent and send a peasant off of it. And so there's a very political, as you can imagine, this is not a perfect system. Don't anybody think I'm mentioning a perfect system. I'm just saying that it appears we are heading toward and I thought alienation, when he first told me that we were heading toward that, I thought he was, smoking something funny, until our largest environmental group in Virginia, the Piedmont Environmental Council, which is our largest kind of in-state environmental group, held a conference on tenureage. And I had never heard that used here, but it was completely about, they asked me to come and speak, but I'd never heard that used here. But the whole idea is you have all, as you mentioned, Brian, you have all this money moving out of the city. They're buying pieces of land. Land ownership is in Americans' DNA. So, I'm wealthy, so I'm buying land. Bill Gates is buying land, right? Okay. So this person comes out and buys this, this country estate. They don't know anything about farming. And so what they do is they just hire some neighbor farmer to come and bush hog it twice a year just to keep it open. And it actually comes out of production in many cases. And so the whole goal of this was noble. It was about, how do we take these country estates owned by rich people and help them to understand that production agriculture can build soil and can actually be better than just bush hogging it twice a year. And it was really quite amazing. but it was very interesting to get some of the paperwork agreements behind some of these very, very long-term relationships. I'll close. I'll just mention, I had a friend that went to China, and he did a pastured livestock farm in China. And in China, in this communist China, you can't own land in China, but you can rent it. And so he rented 1,000 acres in China for 50 years. So 1,000 acres, he rented it for 50 years for $50 a year. Now that doesn't sound like too bad a deal for me, because a lot of our capital is tied up in the land. And this allowed him to not tie his capital up in the land, but to actually, tie it up in things that actually were, turn a return on investment. I had another friend went to outer Mongolia, and they actually sent 3 farmers over here to see me, and I visited with them, these 3 Mongolian farmers. I said, Mongolia, you can't own land either. I said, so if I came to Mongolia and wanted to start a farm, what would I do? They said, well, you come to the village elders and you present your plan. And if we're interested in it, then we'll say, okay, you can go over there and do your thing over, we'll tell you. And then if we like it, you can just stay there. And if you continue to do a good job and you're beneficial to the community, you can stay there, your whole life and your family's life. And that's how you kind of carve out a place. I said, so how much would it cost me to do this? And they said about 25 cents an acre per year. 25 cents an acre per year. So, I've had experience being at places where this American ideal of I have to own my property, control my property, live on my property. There's a lot of other ways to skin that cat. And I just think that we limit ourselves as farmers if the only way we see forward for our farm is to actually own the land and be, a sole controller, that there are collaborative, there are shared expectations. I mean, we lease several properties. We sit down and we create, shared objectives. And so that we go into it with very clear written expectations about what's going to happen on that land. And those are shared. And so I think we can do a lot more if we're not afraid to communicate, be transparent, and develop partners that share expectations and objective.
Perfect. And I know you said you had to go. We're getting very, very close. So let's close it out. Tell people where they can find you, where they can buy their books, where they can get in contact, and where they can send you hate mail. I can get my email address for the hate mail. I don't care.
Yeah. I don't have a personal website. Everything comes through Polyface Farm. So our website has, my speaking schedule, our, food, swag, seminars that we're doing, information, whatever, books. It's Polyface Farms, POLYFACE, polyfacefarms.com. And so just jump on the website. You can contact us. You can visit that. It's a very comprehensive website, lots of information on there. And we welcome you to come and enjoy it.
Awesome. Joel, I really appreciate your time today. It's been a lot of fun. And I guess I'll go ahead and let you go because I'd hate to make you late for your next appointment.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been a real delight and pleasure. Come see us.
I'll try to do that next time I'm out in Virginia, but have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.